What's up, you guys? Good morning, good evening, whatever applies to you. Hope you are staying safe. And today we are going to talk about porn-induced erectile dysfunction, right? How not to get PIED. PIED stands for porn-induced erectile dysfunction, right? So, before we do anything else, I want to put out a disclaimer, right? This erectile dysfunction can happen to basically any addict, right? Basically anyone with an addiction can get erectile dysfunction, addiction-induced erectile dysfunction, right? But this is so commonly seen in people like smoking addicts, porn and sex addicts and alcoholics, people like that, right? This is most commonly seen in people like that. I myself have struggled with that. I'm not denying that whatsoever, right? So this is not me passing judgments towards the people who are suffering with that, right? This is me talking about the issue in itself. And also I want to say upfront that erectile dysfunction is not a thing that's only caused by addictions, right? There can be a plethora of different reasons, but in this video specifically, I'm going to talk about the addiction-induced erectile dysfunction, and PIED is basically porn-induced erectile dysfunction, which is a type of addiction-induced erectile dysfunction. So today, I'm going to first of all talk about why do you get porn-induced erectile dysfunction or addiction-induced erectile dysfunction in general, right? And secondly, I'm going to talk about how to fix porn-induced erectile dysfunction or addiction-induced erectile dysfunction. Under that, I'm going to talk about 3 different strategies. These are not the only things that will work, right? These are the things that are tried and true for me personally. So this is partly due to my personal experience. And the third thing, this is the most important thing, which is prevention of porn-induced erectile dysfunction or addiction-induced erectile dysfunction. I mean, it's pretty simple. If you are no longer addicted to something, you will not get addiction-induced erectile dysfunction. But in this case, I'm going to talk about 5 strategies, tried and true strategies in my experience to prevent porn-induced erectile dysfunction or addiction-induced erectile dysfunction, like I said, because the mechanisms are the same in addiction-induced erectile dysfunction, whatever the addiction is. So the first subtopic of the day, which is why do you get porn-induced erectile dysfunction, right? So an erection is basically dictated by the excitement that you feel for sex, right? Basically, that's what is dictating the erection, right? The excitement that you feel for sex. And what dictates the excitement in itself is this little thing called dopamine, right? I've talked about dopamine a lot in this channel up to this point, right? And in my video where I talked about this, it's titled as how to retain dopamine sensitivity, right? Go check that out as well. So in that video I talked about this thing in depth, but basically the sensitivity for dopamine in your brain is real important, right? So what happens when you are excited to sexuality is that your brain will pump a decent amount of a decent amount of dopamine into your brain, and that's what dictates your excitement for sex, right? So what happens when you are exposed for hyper exciting things, right? Let's say smoking nicotine or porn or like gambling, things like that, right? Hyper exciting things, alcohol, etc., 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 right? There's a lot of hyper exciting things in today's world, right? So when your brain is exposed to these hyper exciting things way too frequently for way too long, what will happen is that your brain will get wired in such a way that it needs that pump of dopamine to feel excited. That's what happens, right? So in that sense, the dopamine pump that's being provided by actual sex is not enough. It's not going to be enough for these people to get excited. These are, like I said, hyper stimulating activities, right? So when your brain is wired to these hyper stimulating activities, you will not find the stimulation of sex to be enough to either start an erection to begin with, like have an erection to begin with, or have it long enough, like a prolonged erection to a point where you can get through the sexuality in a nice, calm manner, right? Oftentimes the people who struggle with the latter will do things like just rush the process. They are like bam 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 bam, climax, done, right? Because they can't prolong it enough to just go through the field and build it up, right? Which is embarrassing, because if they don't do that, then right in the middle of the process their erection will go to the thing that Amber Heard left on the net, if you know what I mean. I can't swear too much because my channel is not even monetized at this point. But anyway, you know what I'm talking about, right? Then it will end up something like a latex wrapped bubble gum. So how can we prevent that? That's the bigger issue, right? Because when you have fun and when you don't have the ability to rush it, and if you are someone who struggles with porn-induced erectile dysfunction or addiction-induced erectile dysfunction, that's really embarrassing right in the middle of the process, right? So how can we prevent that is the next subtopic of the day. How to fix PIED, or like I said many times, addiction-induced erectile dysfunction, right? I'm going to talk about 3 different strategies under that, which I will write off the camera to save your precious time. So the second subtopic of the day, how to fix PIED. Under that, I'm going to talk about these 3 subtopics. Number one, strategy, right? These are the subtopics or the strategies that we are going to talk about today. Number 1, stop consuming what you are addicted to, or like no hyper exciting activities to begin with, right? Yeah, sure. You're going to have to stop consuming that, because that way your brain can have time, your brain can have space to actually rewire itself to a point where you can find enough excitement in sexuality, right? So that's really important, and this is a long time process, right? It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in a week. It might not happen in a month, but this thing can help you out tremendously given enough time, right? So stopping the consumption of what you are addicted to is the most obvious thing, and it's gonna be the most important thing. That's the basis of this whole process of fixing porn-induced erectile dysfunction, or again, addiction-induced erectile dysfunction, right? The second thing is dopamine detox. I've done a whole video series on dopamine detox, so go check that video series out. There are 6 videos I've done on the subject of dopamine detox, right? So dopamine detox can help you out, accelerate that process, right? The rewiring process. It can help you out a lot in that way, but it can do very little to no good if you don't have the first thing down, right? This can do little to no good, just like your thing that can't get erected to begin with, or sustain that erection long enough to a point where it can actually do enough good in a sexual encounter, right? So I'm just kidding. But the idea that I conveyed remains, right? So this can help out tremendously, and it can help you out in acceleration of the process. But in order for this to work at its max capacity, at its max ability, you're gonna have to dial this down first, right? The first thing is the most important thing in this case, and dopamine detox can help that. And the third strategy that worked for me personally is being mindful of my pleasurable activities. Right, you're gonna have to be mindful of your pleasurable activities. Like I mentioned in the previous point, I've done a whole video series on dopamine detox, right? As far as the point 2 and 3 goes, everything you need to know about that will be in that series, and there's gonna be a lot of information, a lot of valuable information for you to consume, right? So in that case, that's all I have to say about the fixation of PIED. And then we are going to move on to the third subtopic of the day, which is the prevention of addiction-induced erectile dysfunction, porn-induced erectile dysfunction, right? That's going to be the most important part of this video. So, prevention of PIED, the most important part, like I said. Number one thing that you should do is having healthy coping mechanisms to deal with addiction, right? In that, you're going to have healthy coping mechanisms to deal with your addictions, because that way you can deal with the emotion that pushes you down the dark route, right? You can deal with the emotion in a healthy way that otherwise push you to the point of feeling the need of hyper exciting your brain to deal with it, right? So the healthy coping mechanisms are extremely important, and later down the road I might do a video on how to figure out the healthiest coping mechanisms possible. I will most probably do a video on that later down the road. So just keep that in mind, right? And two, setting up new goals and chasing them. This might sound like completely random, right? But this does two things. One, it will keep your brain busy in the all right ways, right? It will keep your brain busy in all the right ways. And two, it will train your brain, and it will teach your brain the importance of actually following through something productive in order to feel the excitement, right? Rather than just having it by doing a couple of clicks, by doing a couple of clicks, or having that excitement a couple clicks away, right? So setting up new goals and chasing them will program your brain in that way, right? And also it will keep your brain busy in all the right ways. So that's really important. The third strategy is following a routine, right? This might also seem like completely random, but again, that is a tried and true method for me personally, right? So following a routine will make sure that you have a game plan, right? That you have a goal and build up game plan in order to go chase that goal, right? So start by locking in simple things, right? Start by locking in a wake up time. Start by locking in a morning routine that fits you on top of that wake up time, right? If you are a Christian, or if you are someone who believes in God, do some prayers in the morning, right? Something like that. As a Buddhist, I do chanting and breath work in the morning, right? and I've done a video on my morning routine. You can go check it out as well. So that's really important, right? That will get your brain to actually follow through some step-by-step plan throughout the day, and repeat it enough times. Your brain will be well disciplined to follow through a set of guidelines or set of instructions, right? That way your brain will be disciplined to actually follow through a structure, rather than just run through things that will hyper excite you just to get through the day, right? That's not productive whatsoever. And the fourth thing is not using sex to better your mood. In my case, it's not actually sex per se. In my case, it's more like masturbation, because like I said in my previous videos, I was raised by conservative Buddhists, right? So these people take these things really seriously. So do I, right? So anyway, in general sense, not using sex to better your mood. Sexuality, the betterment of mood when you have sex, has to be a byproduct of sexuality. It should never be the main goal of sexuality, right? When you use sexuality just for the sake of bettering your mood, it will end up, it most probably will end up in a place where you are going down that same rabbit hole of an addiction to a point of erectile dysfunction. Why? Let me give you an analogy and explain it that way, right? Let's say someone's just started smoking cigarettes, right? At first, that person might do 2 or 3 cigarettes, nothing crazy, and they will most probably not do a whole box of cigarettes a day, at the beginning. Why? They feel enough stimulation, they feel enough excitement to get through the day, or to get through whatever. It might be a work shift or something like that, right? To get through whatever they need to get through by smoking 2 or 3, like a moderate amount of cigarettes. But later down the road, like after years of continuing this pattern, they will end up in a place where they will most probably again end up in a place where they need a couple of boxes maybe to feel the same stimulation, right? This same phenomenon happens in this case too. When you have sex just for the sake of feeling better, right? Just for the sake of bettering your mood, just for the sake of feeling happier, or whatever the case might be, you will have that kick, and you will wire your brain to a point where you will no longer feel that betterment of the mood by just having sex, right? Then you're gonna have the need to stimulate your brain more and more and more to feel the same level of excitement. That's how your brain gets rewired to a point where you will no longer feel the excitement that you had to feel in order to have an erection, right? So that's why not using sex or not using masturbation to better your mood is such a good idea to prevent addiction-induced erectile dysfunction, right? And last but not least, training athleticism. In this case, what I recommend you do personally, right? What I recommend you do personally in this case is to start doing a hybrid protocol, right? Don't focus just on one athletic endeavor, right? Choose a couple of athletic endeavors that you can stick to and build up a hybrid protocol, right? I will tell you how I personally go on about things. First of all, I will tell you the athletic endeavors that I chose, right? I chose strength, hypertrophy. Hypertrophy means basically muscle building, right? Strength, hypertrophy. The third thing is cardiovascular endurance, and the fourth thing is mobility, right? These four things. Then I will tell you how I go on about things. First of all, mobility will never ever take the front seat, right? Mobility is always the back burner, so to speak. It's like, it's at the very end. Because for me, mobility training is a way that I make sure that I'm just mobile enough to do the other three things, right? My strength training, my hypertrophy training, and my cardiovascular training, right? So that's why I do mobility trainings, just to supplement or aid the process of doing other three things. And when it comes to hypertrophy and strength training, those are basically the front seat things, right? Most of the time, if I prioritize the strength, right, the secondary thing, the second big thing would be hypertrophy. If I prioritize the hypertrophy for that training block, the secondary thing, the second big thing will become strength in most cases. Sometimes I just train hypertrophy as the main big thing, and then cardiovascular endurance, and the third thing would be my strength training, right? Or I train strength as my main thing, and then cardiovascular endurance, and then hypertrophy, something like that, right? Something along those lines. I almost never prioritize, like, the main big thing. I never train cardiovascular endurance as the main big thing either. So that's how I structure my things, right? That's how I structure my athletic training. So you can choose whatever you want, right? If you are a big fan of calisthenics, you can choose that as your main training protocol. Do weighted calisthenics or body weight calisthenics. If you are not a huge fan of cardio training, like cardiovascular training, as a way of you train like directly, then don't do it, or keep it to a minimum. So that way, you can figure out what works for you. This is the protocol that works for me personally as a person. I'm not saying that it will work for you as well. You do your research, you do a deep dive, and understand what works for you and go for it. But what I'm saying is that training athleticism is a huge part of this. Why? Because studies have shown that training, like physical training, physically challenging yourself, will alter your hormones or optimize your hormones in such a way that it feeds into your sex drive, right? The better your sex drive is, the more prolonged erection you can have, right? So that means training athleticism will have an impact on your prevention of PIED, right? With all that said, I want to mention this again. I want to hammer this point down, right? This is the way that you can go on about addiction-induced erectile dysfunction. And like I said in the beginning of the video, I want to hammer this point down again. Erectile dysfunction is caused by a plethora of different things. This is just one thing, right? Let's say you faced an accident which caused a hernia, right? And that hernia prevented your blood flow to a testicle of yours, right? So when that happens, you will have much lower testosterone levels than the optimal range or the healthy range. So in that way, you can have an erectile dysfunction, right? There's many different things that can cause an erectile dysfunction. So this is just one thing, and this is directly related to the main subject that I'm talking about in this channel, right? So that's why I talked about this specific thing. With all that being said, I will end this video right here. As always, my social media will be down in the description below. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. All the YouTube stuff that will help my channel grow, and that will help me push this message towards more and more people, and basically make the world a better place. I appreciate your help, and until next time, I'm high value guy, and may the triple G bless you.